thank you all for being here today. The conversation is going to be in the following structure. First, we're going to have Stephen Lyle. He's going to help us out to better understand what an angel investor does. He's one of the founders of Oxbridge Capital Partners. And then we're going to have a conversation with Yasreen. She is the head of the angel side of Oxbridge Capital Partners. So she is the go-to person if you would like to pitch, if you would like to have a conversation about the stage in which your company is at today. She's the go-to girl. So it's a pleasure to have this amazing conversation we're going to have today. It's going to be around an hour. And please do capture all your Q&As in the chat box so we can answer them at the end of the session. Today also, we have the privilege of having a lot of CBA ambassadors represented here today. Cambridge Business Association is the business bridge between Europe, particularly Silicon Fen, based in Cambridge, and Latin America. And that is why we have 10 ambassadors representing 10 countries in LATAM in order to create real local value to every single country represented. So thank you so much for being here today. And I would like to give the floor to Steve Lyle in order to get started. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Guillermo. Give me a thumbs up, Yasreen, if I sound all right. Fantastic. That means everybody else can hear me. So we just wanted to give a very breezy flyover about angel investing basics. And it never ceases to amaze me how misunderstood, this process is. People hear, angel investing, but they kind of know what it is, but they don't actually know what it is. So I just wanted to say that, a lot of what you're going to see in this presentation is from what I believe to be the gold standard in angel investing. It's the book titled Angel Investing, so that should be easy for you to remember, by David S. Rose. David is also the founder of Gust, which is the largest online platform for syndicating deals in the United States. It's a global platform, but it's also been a data source. And you'll see a few data sources that I cite from David Rose's Gust. So, what is an angel fund? Generally speaking, well, angel funds, they help startups. They start companies and they grow those companies and they fund those companies throughout all those early stages. And so, but what do they look like? What actually are they? How are they configured? So, we have a nice flyover screen here, and I'd like to turn the keys over to Yasreen, and she'll give you a nice survey of that.
Hi everyone. Your turn, Steve. Thumbs up if you can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, to give you an overview of the rest of the presentation, will give you a lot of details about how what are the key aspects to look at when you create an angel fund. But basically, it's down to a group of people who have decided to pour their money together and invest into entrepreneurs, early stage startups. And so at Oxbridge Angels, which is the early stage investment fund we have created, we are a group of entrepreneurs, business executive, MBAs, executive MBAs, and various accredited investors pouring our money together into this Oxbridge Angels fund. And the way we are managing the fund today is through a group of volunteers working together in making the decisions. Some other funds will have professionally managed funds with people fully dedicated to the fund and making those decisions. And the beauty of the way we are structuring Oxbridge Angels as well is the fact that we are bringing expertise across a very wide group of sectors, which means as a fund, you end up with a very well diversified portfolio of investments because you're represented by a very large group of sectors being represented and experts heavily involved in the day-to-day in their respective companies working on their respective expertise. So those are brought in together to create an angel fund. And usually when you have an angel fund, you invest into a startup in a very kind of patient way. It's a long-term view. You're not looking for an exit within the next year or two. We're more talking about a fund that will last 5 to 10 years. So there's an assumption that the capital should be patient, and the people who are injecting their money into an angel fund have to have that high tolerance, not only to risk, but also failures, because we're taking this diversified approach where some of them will do really well and others will may not do as well, and the balance of the two will give you your return. And so that needs to be well known when entering the fund. And that's why we expect from angel investors to self-certify themselves as sophisticated investors. And that's something that is important because usually funds are regulated and are monitored by the Financial Conduct Authority. And therefore we need to make sure people understand the risk they're taking by and injecting their capital into those kind of funds. The other important aspect as an angel in general is the temperament of being very balanced, I would say, because you're dealing with entrepreneurs, you're here to care and nurture the growth of those companies and of those people, and you bring complementing capabilities to those entrepreneurs that are putting all their days and nights into making their business and their mission a reality. And so it's quite important to have a group of people as part of the Angels Network that have that self-discipline and that even temperament in supporting the fund and the startup. The last part of the profile of an angel investor is the willingness to learn and the general care, respect, love for those entrepreneurs. And it is a growing process. All of us as angels investors, not only we're giving our expertise, but we're also getting a lot back by learning through the journey of those particular startups. So it's a very expanding role over time for you as much as for the startup. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Yazreen. It's important to know that there's quite a funneling process. You know, we get a lot of funding requests. You know, funding requests can be just as simple as somebody that we met in a coffee shop, or we got an email, or we got, you know, somebody sent us a PowerPoint presentation online, and you know, we look at it, right? But there's a screening process, and out of all those, you know, we'll select a few that might get a pre-screening invite. And it's pre-screening invites, maybe sitting down, you know, maybe Yazreen and me, or somebody else from our pipeline committee, just to kind of get a temperature check, you know, to see if this is a company we want to send to the pipeline committee. And then you can see it gets funneled down. Very few of those companies, you know, 1/10 of all of those actually gets to pitch to the full investment committee. And according to Gus statistics, that's, you know, 2.5% out of 2.5 companies out of 100 companies, right? So that's a lot of work, right? So 1 out of every 40 of the companies that we see actually gets an investment. The other thing to note is what a portfolio looks like in an angel fund. I really want to encourage, by the way, a couple of the books that I posted here, maybe somebody can drop into the chat. You know, first one was Angel Investing by David Rose, but this one, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, really important. He talks about the power law dynamics of VC portfolio's, angel fund portfolios, that they're heavily weighted on just 1 or 2 companies out of the whole portfolio to carry the whole portfolio. And the reason behind that is because of the high morbidity, you know, or the high fail rate. It's very high, right? 50% of those investments, they go to just 0. It's actually higher. It's closer to 60%. And yet for the portfolio to be a successful portfolio, the winners have to work really hard. If you have half of them or 60% going to 0 and 20% breaking even, you can see that, you know, you have to do really well with that bottom 1/3, and even, you know, you need to have 1 or 2 20Xers in there, right? And that carries a portfolio. That's the ROI. It's just to kind of give you a sense of what the IRRs look like. You know, that a successful portfolio, you know, on a 7 to 10 year angel fund will have a 27% internal rate of return. as an asset class, it's the #1 performing asset class. But as you all know, this is not a straight line, right? And these numbers come from Willamette University. You can see the 2.6 ROI, over 3.5 years, IRR 27%. So it's very important to not make one angel investment. If you're an investor, and I am talking from the investment side of the ledger, you really want to look at a portfolio of companies. More so also, if you can just invest with a group of people, that will help you achieve what I call portfolio status. And there's reasons for that. And call it the 5 great truths. First of all, I've already demonstrated that most startups fail, right? And by most, I would say nearly all. Okay. 75% of startups, according to David Rose, they shouldn't be funded by anyone under any circumstance. And Yazreen and I and Guillermo, we've met a lot of those already. The nice people, right? And maybe they have an idea, but an idea doesn't necessarily scale up to a 30 to 50x return, right? Perhaps it could be a boutique opportunity, right? So the problem here, though, is you don't know which startups are not going to fail. In other words, you don't know which startups are actually going to be completely successful. So we also believe that startups don't have to, if they do fail, it doesn't have to be a 0 return. So we call that soft landing. It's very important. You can mitigate these losses as an angel investor through soft landings or acqui-hires, or an IP sale. The way that we do that is, we're partnered up with corporate venture capital firms like General Motors, for instance, or Amazon or Google, or Intel Capital, which has their M&A side. And why is that important? Well, we run into startups all the time, and I've seen time and time again in the past where they think they're making a car, but what they really have is an engine. Nobody wants the car, but the engine's really cool. So General Motors says, we'll buy that engine from you because that would work in a lot of our cars. So that becomes a soft landing. Well, we don't get our money back, but maybe we get 50 cents on the dollar or something, right? And they might even say more, oh, this team that you have is quite unique. We would like to acquire them and hire them. And then we'll give them some cash. Or they might say, you know what, we just like the intellectual property. We want your patents because we think we can make that better than you. We can make it faster than you, and we can scale it better than you. And that could be an opportunity. So the key thing about all this is when there is fail fast. You may have heard this phrase before. Fail slow is a very expensive and very tough on the investors and very tough on all the stakeholders, the employees, the founders, everybody. I have said this before, but and Peter Thiel says it in 0 to 1 as regards the power law dynamics of this asset class. It's a numbers game. And just to give you an example, if you just make 5 startup investments, and this is generated through Monte Carlo scenarios, 5,000 iterations, right? At 5 investments, you're 70% likely to get less than half your money back. So that's kind of scary. So you probably want to make, you want to diversify that across, more cycles, more iterations, because, at over 20 investments, now you're 60% likely to get a 2x return. Okay. And this is what we call, according to Markowitz, portfolio theory, this is the efficient frontier. And this is kind of where we'd like to be as an angel fund. So we're on a race to get our first 20 investments, so we can start to experience what we call, the power law dynamics, or what we call Markowitz inertia, portfolio theory inertia, where even though we'll have a lot of failures, we're still going to come in at that, 2.5 to 3.5x ROI, that 27 to 32% IRR on the long term. Okay, that's key, and that should make sense to everybody. So the other thing to know is things go down before they go up, and that should seem obvious to you. So this J curve is true not just for startups, but for portfolios, right? Startups tend to go through adversity before they see a lot of success, and angel fund portfolios are the same way. Yeah, you make an investment in a startup, it starts to lose money immediately. Okay, so the value of it's going down. So every investment that you make, the value goes down. This isn't like the stock market where you buy Amazon and it just goes up vertically, right? No, it is 100% going to go down in value, and that's why it's important that as the startups go through their early milestones, that if you're going to make an investment in a startup as an angel investor, you want to hold some capital back to do a follow-on investment. And a rule of thumb is 50%, but it could be much more. Yasreen likes to tell our startups that, we intend, if we're going to give you one investment, we intend to give you 2 or 3 investments. If you continue to be successful and you get through your milestones, we're going to be here for you. We're holding dry powder back for you. That's what they call it, dry powder, so we can still keep supporting the startups through business in the J curve, at the bottom of the J curve. Okay, and the final great truth of why you need not less than 20 investments is that all companies always need more money. They always need more money. Having been a founder across several companies over the last 20 years, I can tell you I always needed more money until I didn't, right? And I love Ben Horowitz's quote here because it's so true. Early stage is very, very difficult. Most of them go through a shutting down experience, and it's real tough. I tell people that want to quit their day job and go do a startup. I always sit them down and make sure. So, okay, so are you married? You're in a relationship? Do you have dependents? Are you going to be happy with not making as much money and struggling? Because this is going to stress you out. It's going to distress you. It's going to be very difficult on your entire body, your mind, and your spirit. It's very challenging. So a startup, a company goes through this life cycle. You see this valley of death. This is where you're most likely to fail before you get into the right side of that continuum where you're going to do an A round. There are lots of early stage things going on here, right? And again, when I sit down with a founder and I said, so here's the thing, congratulations, we're going to invest in you. You're still more likely to fail than succeed. And they're wondering, well, why are you investing? Well, we're hopeful and we think that you've got it to be successful, and you should believe that you're successful. But I'm just telling you, statistics say you're probably going to fail, right? That's the reality of it. Just in terms of like phases, I always like to think of this in terms of the resources necessary to start a company. You have whatever you're going to offer. You need to identify who your customer is. You're going to need cash in the early stages, and the organization is typically made up of a couple people who met at a bar or met at work or met in college, and they're working out of their garage. They call these the founders, right? And in phase one, the offering could just be a PowerPoint presentation, or maybe they bootstrapped and they created this really cool mousetrap, right? But it's not a product yet. And we always tell the startups, make sure you clearly identify the problem. What the problem is that you're solving. What is the big hole in the universe that only you can fill, or that you have a unique differentiating value proposition or differentiating sales proposition? You're approaching this problem different than anybody else. Those are very special factors that we consider before we make an investment. Have you identified the problem very clearly? Have you identified your unique solution to that problem? And in the early stages, you're not necessarily ready for an angel investment. So you're either bootstrapping it, sweat equity, or you have friends and family that you brought in. Economic development is key. We have Innovate UK in the United Kingdom. Latin America has their versions of that. Chile's got Corfo, and there's some opportunity to get what we call non-dilutive financing, where you're not selling any stock. But eventually you get to phase 3, you have your MVP, a minimal viable product, you've got your mousetrap, it's killing mice, and it's doing it in a unique way. You're using lasers, something like that. And you actually have you have a first client that's paying for this. Like, we love your laser mousetrap. And now you have a minimum viable organization. You actually have a company. You've got a product. You solved a problem. You got a customer. Wow, this is a company. But now you need to scale it up. All right, you're hiring employees, you're generating a lot more revenue, but now you need more people to help support it. And you're going to make blue mouse traps and red mouse traps and polka dot mouse traps and laser light show mouse traps. And that's a lot more people. And that's when the VC comes in. That's the A round. Give you another look at what that looks like. Is that this is what you see here is the continuum, the venture capital continuum. All right, and in the United Kingdom, this is the valley of death too. The reward for early stage startups for all their successes in the United Kingdom, and this has happened in Latin America, we're seeing it, and in North America happens. You get to the early milestones, and then you need to raise $10 million or £8 million in an A round, and nobody wants to invest in you, although you've been successful, because A round is the valley of death. There's a lot of B round money, C round money when you're de-risked and you're already generating a lot of revenues, and there's lots of angel money to the left, but this is the valley of death. So the way that we've approached it is, and angel funds approach this differently, but we've approached it from the standpoint of filling up the whole continuum with people and money so that there isn't a valley of death. On the left side, which is the angel fund territory, Yasreen and her team, they'll invest in anything from a PowerPoint presentation to a prototype for a mousetrap. I use mousetrap just because it's an easy thing for us to understand. And then through the early stages, they go from prototype to like maybe a product, and they're raising a little bit more capital, and maybe at product launch they have some revenue paying customers, right? They're still not a viable enterprise, but they've identified customers that will write them a check for their product or their service. And now they might even need some bigger capital in a pre-A round. But once this company is ready for scale up, once it really starts to take off, that becomes the territory of the co-branded VC. So we have, Oxbridge Angels, and we have Oxbridge Capital Partners, on the right side. So this whole continuum, then we could take them all the way to an IPO. Or we could do a merger acquisition with one of our corporate venture capital firms. So this is how angel funds work. This is how they hand off to the VCs later on. Remember, angel fund is not a VC. It's like an early stage VC. A VC's A round, B round, Z round, okay. But we decided to fill that whole continuum and try to prevent the valley of death for startups. So how do you find your deals? Well, it's quite the network effect. This is exactly what we've experienced. And so you have angel funds, which like to work together. This is what the ecosystem looks like. And in Oxford, here's what the investment ecosystem looks like. It's a confab of, VCs, investment clubs, angel funds, and we compete and we cooperate. So it's a co-opetition. We can syndicate together, and it's nice to invest together. We did our first investment with Amadeus, and so they can share off our brain trust, we can share off theirs, and you de-risk off each other a little bit. And so it should be a friendly ecosystem. In addition to that, of course, you all know about the accelerators. They're on a global scale. Y Combinator, Techstars is a global accelerator feeder, and it feeds into our ecosystem in the UK, feeds into the ecosystem into Latin America as well. And then universities will have their version of that in the university ecosystems. You can see what we have here through Oxford, Cambridge, and London. And then you have pitch-off events. These are very social events. You get together and you have a beer, and you watch pitch-offs, and they're a lot of fun. Academia as well can be quite the resource. We have Oxford Innovations in Oxford. We have the Tech, Cambridge Enterprise in Cambridge, and in London, UK. Of course, Imperial College. Our first investment was with Imperial College. University of Bristol, we're looking at it in this UK. This is a plug for Yasreen. University of Bristol has a really cool tech transfer department, and we're actually consulting with them right now on a deal, so I included them. But university tech transfer departments they're basically set up to help academics, students maybe, postdocs that have invented something and help transfer that into a commercial enterprise, help protect the intellectual property. So we like to talk to these types because they're at what we call the epicenter of high quality deal flow opportunity coming out from the best minds in the world. And of course, there are social events like meetups. We have launch events. I'm sure everybody's heard of TechCrunch. You have Disrupt London. You have that Disrupt Los Angeles, Disrupt Paris. It's everywhere. Platforms have really emerged as a resource for deal flow. Now, by the way, I just want to stipulate that crowdfunding sources like GoFundMe, these are not angel funds. Right? Typically, you can invest like $10 into something that's trying to raise $1 million or £1 million, and it might give you a right to access it. You don't have stock in the company, so that's not what that is. Okay, but you'll see these platforms, AngelList, Crowd. You can access it by mobile. Things that we're seeing also in the United Kingdom, platforms which allow syndication to happen, where you as an angel investor could say, I don't really have time to go chase deals, but Cedars and Syndicate Room, they have a lot of deals that they can present to me, and I can be an independent investor. You don't really develop any fellowship there. It's not very social. You don't get to know the people. There's no community and all that. Dalio has been nice because Dalio sets up a platform which provides like a back office infrastructure for angel funds. So for instance, Oxbridge Angels, we're onboarding with Dalio, and Dalio provides us a total infrastructure. We don't even have a bank account. So when you're investing together as a group, that's where things can go bad. There could be some bad players, you get fraud, you have you have Madoff type issues. Well, Dalio provides a KYC and an anti-money laundering, protection. They provide an online access, and all the monies are wired through their custodial. So we never manage any monies. They protect our investors, and they make sure that every investor is suitable. So this is wonderful for us. So we really enjoyed that process, and this is where the world's going, right? And the enterprising of everything. Dalio is the future. Conferences are wonderful. The mother of all startup conferences is, of course, the Computer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and they have the international version in Europe. It's our goal to start taking groups of those people on an annual basis. And you walk the floor. It's so massive that no one person could ever walk. I'd say it would take 10 years to walk it, but that's a great source because you see the emerging technologies across every sector. And look at all these others, right? And you have Latin America versions of all of these, right? And personal connections are the most important. It's people who meet people. I'm on a plane. Somebody says they're in a startup. Oh, really? Talk to me about that. Okay. Or maybe your brother or your sister's doing a startup. Personal connections are everything here. Structure is important. I want to really emphasize that, we're not, an angel fund is not an investment club. All right. If there needs to be order, there needs to be some kind of general partner or something in the way of a general partner. Oxbridge Angels, we have an investment committee that works with the founders, with Rashid and myself, and we basically are a collaborative general partnership. And but it's structured, highly structured. Okay, so you have the fund, right? And you have general partners who work for the limited partners. Limited partners are just the investors. And limited because they're not day to day, they're not taking full responsibility of everything. They have day jobs, right? And but in an angel fund, they typically are the ones that greenlight investments. Very democratic. So the LPs they'll provide investments, but there are also annual membership fees because you have administrative costs. We spent £25,000 on just setting up our charter in the first year. So you have little management fees that come in, and there could be some carried interest as well. So a little bit of equity for the GP group that works for the benefit of all the LPs, to protect them, to help de-risk these deals, to provide administration, organization, and all that. This is a standard and usual thing. For VCs, this is called 2 and 20. They get 2% management fee a year. They get 20% of the carry, but over 10 years, it works out to like 2% a year. All right, so that's where these numbers come from. And structure is important. Remember, this is not an investment club. This is an organized angel fund. There's an investment committee, or there's a board of directors, there's a pipeline committee. Remember the funnel process, I'll return to that. And there are deal leads, I like to call them the Sherpas. They will take the startup up the mountain, and they'll help that startup get a green light with the investment committee. They become the champions, right? And they have due diligence teams. And so if you are an angel investor and you say, well, I work in telecom, I don't know anything about software, but I sure know a lot about telecom, or I work in finance. I don't know anything about anything except finance. Well, that's a skill set that's needed too on a due diligence team, okay? Or maybe HR. These are all very important skill sets. So our due diligence team's made up of all these kinds of people with multiple different types of talents, okay? And then eventually it goes to a full committee and everybody gets to vote, okay? So remember the funnel that I showed you. So Oxbridge Angels is very typical to other angel funds. You like to make 6 to 8 investments a year. But how do you get to those 6 investments? What's the funnel process look like? Well, remember the 10%. So in real terms, it works out to, out of 40 funding requests. Remember, a funding request could just be a conversation I had with somebody in the hallway. It could be whatever. There's pre-screening activities go on. It's 1 or 2 meetings with a subset of people, 1 or 2 people, then maybe 6 or 7 people that say, hey, let's put this startup in front of the investment committee. So this is typically like an 8-week cycle for us, so just to get to one investment, this is what we've got to do, right? So in 8 weeks, we're likely going through 120 funding requests and 39 pre-screening invites and maybe 9 pitches, right? And by the way, this last 8 weeks we've been pretty active, and we're close to that. Now we do a lot better in our pre-screening, this is more efficient for us. But remember, Gust is providing statistics based upon everybody that hits their website. Okay, so it's actually a lot more efficient for us. And in terms of failure, it's not as bad for a lot of the funds. Oregon Venture Fund, Oregon Angel Fund, which our charter is based on, for example, has great success. Out of like 70 investments, they've only had 3 go to 0. And that's because they do the due diligence really well. And we're trying to mirror that, and we think we're going to be equally successful. Then there's this thing called sidecar investing. So you don't just have to invest in a general fund, in an angel fund. You can also hold some money back and say, wait a minute, my background is in telecom, and they're investing in a telecom company startup. I like that company. So even though I've invested in the fund, I want to hold some money back to invest more of my own personal money so I can get a deeper piece of that stock. And so you sidecar with the fund, which is the main driver. And so, here's the sidecar, right? So given an offering, a small offering, you have the fund. The fund comes in and says to the telecom, we'll give you 100,000 pounds. And then maybe you'd say, hey, I would like to sidecar. I want to help the fund out, and I'm going to come in with 50,000, but you still have more money that you need to bring to the table. So we need to recruit more sidecar investors to finish the deal. The fund says we're only doing 100,000 of the 300,000, and we won't do less than if the startup doesn't raise 300,000, we're not going to invest. This is the minimum requirement, but we'll give you 100. So it has to somehow syndicate the deal. So that's what sidecars look like. And now the sidecars come together, produce 200,000 in investment, in addition to the 100,000 for the fund, and the deal gets done. Make sense? And a lot of times these sidecars could be inside the fund, they could be outside the fund, it could be other companies that have nothing to do with us. The lead investor together with the fund will go out and recruit other investors. Okay, our first deal that we invested in, we were kind of like a sidecar investor with another lead, and we can actually become a sidecar in another. So that's what happens. Very collaborative. So it's very important to understand that the GP or the GP entity is like the Scrum Master. They have all these personalities and all these things they got to manage. This person has to be a very special person, and the group has to be a very special group. And so I'm going to turn the keys over to who I believe is one of the most special people that does this as good or better than anybody I've ever known, and that's Yazreen.
So yes, to sum up the concept of GP and sidecars, the way we are applying that theory to Oxbridge Angels is the fact that we have our master fund, as you can see here. Our master fund is made of a group of limited partners, which are the individuals who are putting their money into the fund. And then together, we decide which startups we're going to invest into or not invest into. So the way we are running Oxbridge Angels is that independent GP here that you can see actually is not anymore a single person or two people, but it's a committee called the investment committee that is made of representative of the LPs that together decide if yes or no they want to invest, after having read the investment memo that has been produced by the due diligence lead that has run the due diligence with a network of experts from our pool of LPs to make sure we believe this investment makes sense. And we do that. We invest into that startup, which augments our portfolio. And as Steve mentioned earlier, that portfolio becomes diverse enough that we reach those 2025 numbers where we increase the IRR and the more likelihood of success by making sure that not only that portfolio is diversified, but the investment recommendations have been made by experts from the fields of that startups and can also leverage on their respective network to make that company even more successful. And so then the other thing we're offering to our investors is not only the master fund invest into the portfolio, but offers, as Steve said, sidecar opportunity. And those sidecar can be the same LPs that now that they've invested into the master fund, they can also individually invest themselves directly into that startup, or they could create a small syndication themselves as a group of friends, and that group of friends puts money together and becomes a sidecar LP that then injects the money into the startup itself. So there are all sorts of ways of doing it, but the main value we're bringing here as this Oxbridge Angels fund and not a network is that we're all putting our money into that master fund, and then the investment committee and the people who are actively running the fund are making decisions on behalf of the entire LPs. Do you want to add something else on this? No? All good?
And you got it.
Okay, so, and I think there's another element, and that's for us the main reason why we're doing it. Beyond investing money, of course, there's the financial capital aspect to it. There's the non-financial aspect, and the vision we have here is, and the reason why we're called Oxbridge Angels is because we're convinced that a lot of the startups that are coming from Oxford, Cambridge, and London, this golden triangle, is where the universities are the most kind of powerful in creating this intellectual property, and we have seen that with all the prizes and the Nobel Prize that have been released in Oxford and Cambridge just by themselves, that have more Nobel Prizes than any other country in the world. So this is quite powerful, and we want to be there in those hubs where the intellectual property is created to make those IPs, transforming them into actual businesses. And we're bringing the business angle to it by leveraging on those network effects. We want to invest on technology that has purpose, keeping the world growing and going. And we get the fun of being entrepreneurs without having the responsibilities that those CEOs and those founders have to face, which is quite nicer, I would say, in terms of the life balance. And so, yeah, it's building, and the last positive effect we want to bring on the people who are part of Oxbridge Angels is building board experience. We want to make sure that the minorities, the diversity aspects of our members of Oxbridge Angels are represented in the boards of the startup we invest into. We have this concept of the main board member and an observer to ensure that we can rotate them and give them that board experience so that we can train the leaders of tomorrow, and providing that support, that network support that will be geared towards helping that startup to succeed. So in a nutshell, this is what the theory of angel investment is, and how Oxbridge Angels is applying that theory. if for whatever reason you want to know more or you want to join the fund, I know you're all most of you are in Latin America, and there's a lot of partnership between Oxbridge and Latin America ongoing at the moment. So if you're interested, please please contact Guillermo, who's opened the talk today. I think you're all more or less connected to him already.